First of all, thanks to ISA for this opportunity to address this very illustrious gathering. Also to my colleagues from the BARC board that I've known over the years, Mr. Sunil Kataria, Mr. Bharat Patel, for facilitating this. Unfortunately, I wanted to be there in person. I was scheduled to travel, but due to a medical condition, I was advised against travel. So having to do this remotely over Zoom. But nevertheless, I will try to do my best. Though I know it's quite challenging after a late lunch and perhaps early cocktails, and I'm standing there in between. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge. And I caught a glimpse of some of the earlier presentations on the YouTube live stream, and some of them were very impressive and quite interesting videos. Unfortunately, I don't have very jazzy slides or videos, but nevertheless, I have a few thoughts and ideas that I want to put out there to the industry ecosystem here in the room. And to do that, let me first begin with a bit of background on AI for India. So after my term ended at Prasar Bharati, one of the efforts that I've been involved with is AI for India, which is essentially a platform that has brought together Indian startups and academia, think tanks, looking at how do we create AI models or AI systems in India with an Indian context and look at the challenges around it. So that was kind of the genesis of AI for India. So with that brief overview of AI for India, let me jump into my presentation. So to set kind of the background to this presentation, let me briefly talk about what is called the Moore's law, right? And if you recall, Moore's law has been the defining principle in terms of how the power of semiconductors, silicon chips has been growing over the years, where every 2 years there's a doubling of capacity in terms of the number of transistors you can pack into the silicon chip, and that just increases the power, and which is what has really fueled this AI revolution that we've seen in the last few years. Unlike what is referred to as the AI winter, which was in the 1970s, 80s, where kind of AI progress kind of stalled. So what we are now seeing is pace of technology evolution. In the Moore's law era was all about doubling in a couple of years, but with AI, this pace is now almost exponential. We are seeing models being rolled out almost every other day. If not in months, it is happening in a few weeks. And that is kind of, creating a whole set of challenges in terms of how one can adopt new technologies. What is the pace at which, be it governments, be it enterprises, at what pace can you really, bring in these technologies into your ecosystem, and how do you really derive value out of it? I think that is kind of the biggest challenge that is perhaps staring both organizations and institutions in the face. And this has a lot of implications for us in terms of as a society, as a nation as well. And I think the Prime Minister Modi recently in a speech at the Paris AI Action Summit kind of used a very apt phrase, calling it, AI is rewriting the code of humanity. So in a sense, AI is humanity's code is the phrase that he used. And the scale of this is kind of unfathomable. And I'll give you one instance. Last week I was at the Delhi University Literature Festival at the SRCC, Sri Ram College of Commerce, along with Mr. Rohit Bansal from Reliance. And we were supposed to have a panel discussion on AI and communication. And one of the students was introducing the panel discussion. And I was struck by a phrase that she used, where she said that AI has become a common tool. The two words that she used were, common and tool, which to me was quite striking, that the degree to which a new technology has found its way within the student community, where they no longer think it is rocket science. It is just something commonplace. It's just another tool that you're using. So that, I think, kind of tells you how fast the technology has moved. And this is, I think, going to create a whole set of challenges in terms of the kind of expectations you have around how your consumers are going to use your products. I think earlier you had the head of Procter and Gamble here, and one of the phrases that I recall in the consumer brand world was the first moment of truth. And today AI may be creating this first moment of truth for your brands. And it may not even be real, it may be a hallucination, and you have no control over it because they may be interacting with some chatbot, which may be describing your products, right? And how do you cope with that? So one of the surveys that our partner organization, CPRG, which works closely with AI for India, did with about 600 Delhi University students, had some very interesting findings that almost 95% of them are using AI as a educational assistant, and almost 67% are using it every week. And what is, I think, to me most striking in terms of why they are using it, 74% are using it for translation and explanation, which I think is very, very interesting, which just tells you where the low-hanging fruit is as far as the Indian ecosystem is concerned. And of course, many of them are experiencing hallucinations and difficulties in accepting what AI is giving them because of all the challenges that we've seen with large language models. Can we go to the next slide, please? So one of the issues with managing exponential change is about how a society can absorb new innovations. And there's a very interesting study that is done by Mr. Jeffrey Ding. There's a paper that he published in 2024, which looks at different countries, United States, China, and other countries, the erstwhile Soviet Union, on what does it take to diffuse an innovation through a society. And some of his findings and his framework of thinking, I think, is relevant equally to a modern enterprise, where he talks about diffusion as a measure of the readiness for either a nation, a society, or a business to absorb new innovations and be able to adopt it as across the chain, across all levels in their everyday activities. And what this paper kind of finds is that most societies or most large institutions either have a diffusion deficit or an innovation surplus, and both these don't really help. And what you really need is a diffusion surplus, where you have the capacity to absorb these innovations and you're able to put them to use within your four walls and your broader ecosystem. One of the messages that comes through this whole analysis is that it is not merely enough to look at innovations within your four walls, because you have to bring together the small and medium enterprises, that long tail that is supporting your business. How are they going to cope with this pace of change? How are they absorbing these innovations? How are they putting these innovations into operation within their workforce? And an interesting aspect that he points out in this study is that there needs to be very strong and dense linkages with research institutions, because only then this diffusion of innovation can happen. And it's kind of counterintuitive that often large businesses are very protective about data, copyrights, intellectual property, and a lot of the approach to innovation is very tightly controlled. And he kind of makes a very counterintuitive argument that as opposed to such a closed approach to innovation, a more effective way to innovate is to have an open innovation architecture, where it could be open data, open source models, because when you have an open approach to innovation, then it creates more fluid conditions for these innovations to diffuse through your entire ecosystem. And he gives a very interesting example. I was listening to the talk earlier by the gentleman from BCG, where he mentioned he was a chemical engineer. And he also was very specific about the year in which he studied chemical engineering in 1995, which also happened to be the year that I was also in my last semester of chemical engineering in 1995. So this paper, in fact, brings about a very interesting aspect of how Germany and the United States were kind of, at a similar level in industrial chemistry in the early 1900s. However, it was the institutionalization of chemical engineering, which, as a discipline, which gave the United States a very decisive advantage over Germany in pushing innovations. And he gives the example of unit operation, which I'm sure many would appreciate from the consumer products industry. So it's not just about the flashy innovations, but it is the boring stuff, the stuff that engineering is made up of. That is crucial if you want long-term, sustainable advantage with new technologies. So a good case in point in this paper is that, despite all the hype around China, because China has been in the conversation over the last many weeks over DeepSeek and, what DeepSeek has done. But I think this paper is a very sobering counter argument to that despite all the hype around, Chinese innovations, China considerably lags in diffusing its innovations through its entire society, except for maybe a couple of notable successes like the high-speed trains and mobile payments. So I think that's tells us that all is not lost, because when this whole DeepSeek announcement came, immediately you had a flurry of posts on social media, a whole bunch of op-ed articles. Where is India? Has India lost the game? I don't think so. I think India has a strong role to play in this entire technology race, and we need to look at this long-term sustainable approach to doing innovations, which is where we will, both the Indian state and the Indian enterprises will gain a competitive advantage. So that kind of sets the stage for my next slide. If you move to the next slide, please, where I've kind of picked this Star Wars metaphor, right? Because if you look at all this hype around large language models and generative AI, it kind of reminds me of C3PO from Star Wars, which, so it is capable of speaking 6 million languages. It's very articulate, very expressive, but really can't get any work done. But then, on the other hand, you have these astromech droids like R2D2, which are not communicative, are not, cannot interact directly with humans. But they are the ones with the deep domain knowledge, the tooling to solve real-world, complex tasks, and that is where the real intelligence lies, right? So if you're looking at what is the approach that you should be taking to infusing AI and AI-based tools within the organization, I would say the R2D2s who get the real work done are perhaps equally or more important than just the C3PO, which is your human interface to interact in a very creative, expressive way in different languages. And I think this is where the hype around DeepSeek and what is happening with generative AI needs to be put into perspective. That approach, which is compute heavy, which requires massive data centers, large amounts of computing power, are going to be unsustainable, especially in the Indian context. Just, I think yesterday, Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, mentioned that the compute requirements have gone up almost 100 times since the release of ChatGPT. And I think that kind of puts this whole aspect into perspective, that sustainability and long-term sustainability is something to think about. And there's something even the Prime Minister brought out during his speech at the Paris Action Summit, where he made the point that the path that India needs to take on AI has to be very different, very unique. It has to be sustainable. And if you look at historically our approach to new technologies, it has always been through quantum leapfrogs, right? If you look at when we had a very low penetration of landlines, we took a leapfrog with mobiles, and we've now become the largest mobile market, in terms of install base of mobile phones. the amount of mobile data consumption, cheapest rates, and so on. Similarly, on cashless payments, again, we leapfrog directly, from mobile, uh, to mobile QR codes, with UPI, which is again creating, billions of transactions on a daily basis. Uh, so when we look at AI in the Indian context, it has to be a similar leapfrog, and our approach has to be compute light because we can't afford these, huge, massive computing power data centers. We would need to look at AI, which can reside on edge devices like mobile phones, and which has very little to no dependency on the cloud and the internet. And this is and when we look at the CPRG survey that I mentioned of the Delhi University students, one of the lowest hanging fruits for use cases in India is going to be in the language space on translations. And the Prime Minister has shown, the way on this with his use of Bhashini for translating his speeches. There's another tool called Anuvadini, which is being used to translate textbooks from primary schools all the way up to the university level. Then you have Bharat Gen out of IIT Bombay, which has been funded by the Department of Science and Technology, which is looking to build an India-specific foundational model, to address the whole language diversity and the compute constraints. So while a lot of attention has been around DeepSeek and what China has done to kind of steal a march over the United States in this race, I think there are many unsung Indian startups which are thinking boldly and differently. So that kind of takes me to my next slide. If you could go to the next slide, please. So one of the persistent use cases that has grabbed attention across the world is on the use of AI for research. So I was at the Global Partnership for AI Summit in Belgrade, in Serbia, last year, towards the end of the year, 2024. And what was striking to me was just the sheer amount of conversation on how many universities and different research bodies were looking to use AI tools to accelerate research. And if you look at a lot of the media reporting around a recent instance where AI helped solve an antibiotic superbug mystery in about 48 hours, something that was eluding researchers for almost decades. I think it kind of gives you an idea on the role AI can play in accelerating research. Now, life sciences is, clearly an area where this has, seen a lot of impact, which has been ahead of the curve in terms of, usage of AI for research. And here you can't really have an LLM-based approach to research because it is both expensive and it is also fraught with serious risks from hallucinations, which can lead to wrong findings, wrong conclusions, fictitious stuff, papers that don't exist. And in an area like life sciences, where it can be a matter of life and death, you're also looking at serious, legal liabilities and compliance requirements. So in research, it is not merely about creating or discovering something new always, but it is also about being diligent, being thorough in your homework, being accurate in your findings, and basing that on very authoritative sources. So this can only happen if the AI-assisted research methodology is able to provide you with complete traceability to source references. So you can pinpoint that this is where I've sourced this idea from, or this is where I've sourced this fact from. And none of the LLMs can do that in a very reliable way. And this is where LLMs fail almost all of the time. So when you're looking at an enterprise scenario where you're also looking at intellectual property, you're looking at data which is very sensitive, you would also want the ability to protect that data while using your enterprise data for research. And the only reliable way to do that is where if your data is encrypted and it is accessed by the AI tool in a secure manner, and you're confident that there is no leakage of this data back into the public domain. So to be able to do that, what you really need is a research tool that can reside on your laptops, It is able to marshal all of your enterprise data in a very secure way using encryption, and is able to automate that research process, and be able to do that without any hallucinations, where you are 99% sure and confident that what the AI is telling you is accurate, reliable, and authoritative, and you're able to do that predictably in a repeatable manner every single time. And I think this is the kind of work that is being done by a very interesting startup in India, Binomial out of Pune, founded by IITians. I believe the CTO, Omkar Patil, is also in the audience today there. So if some of you want to speak to him about this, I'm sure he'll be happy to explain. I'm told by Binomial that one of their clients, implantable medical devices, was able to improve their yields of implants from 65% to 98% over a 6-month period by reducing failures using these AI research tools. And that's a huge benefit to them, because in their case, a failure of an implant is not just a normal failure, it is also a surgery, and that can entail huge liability. So ultimately, you would want to build these kinds of R2D2s, which are trustworthy, which are reliable, and can deliver on your operational excellence in a very predictable manner. So which takes me to the next slide, where I have some more use cases from different startups that are looking at AI beyond the world of large language models. While what has happened with LLMs has created a whole lot of consumer interest, societal interest in AI. It has forced governments to debate publicly on how to govern AI. I think there's a lot of value that is in models which go beyond language and generation. For example, a whole wide range of enterprise use cases can benefit from foundation models that are able to sense, that are able to interpret information beyond the spoken and written word. I was very glad to see that video that was shared by Mr. Rohit from HUL, showing how machines in the production line are using sensors and are able to learn and reliably perform operations. So there are a whole range of startups which are part of our AI forum or have interacted with us, who have taken this risk to build these foundation models, be it on vision, be it on sensors, be it on audio, with a focus on the Indian context. And I think the Indian context is very, very important, because if you look at the most of the models that have been built by the global tech majors, they've been built on data which is from outside India. And most of the time, the Indian context is very different, because we have a huge diversity, we have very chaotic situations, we have very densely populated settings. So how do you build models which work in this context? And it can't be because your model is trained on data from elsewhere. So one example is Parallaxium, a Bangalore-based startup, again founded by IITians, which has been looking at analyzing CCTV feeds in real time in the Indian conditions, be it in manufacturing shop floors, be it in retail spaces, to be able to do a whole bunch of analytics and insights in real time, from quality to customer safety to a whole bunch of things. And one of the things that we are doing with them as AI for India is to take that vision model and extend it to public spaces, where can we analyze CCTV feeds in public settings, which can recognize Indian clothing, Indian attires, which are able to make sense of what's happening in densely populated streets, roads, and be of use to our public bodies like municipal corporations, local police, and so on. And one of the thoughts here is to potentially make this vision model for public spaces available as a digital public good as part of any potential India stack for AI. Another interesting startup which is using vision models, again an IIT founded startup, is combining camera feeds with sensor data to monitor the health of livestock, and especially the reproductive health, which is very critical in the livestock industry. and they're able to do this with precision in a very highly reliable manner. Similarly, MWAC, which is a startup incubated by IIT Kanpur, has taken audio models which go beyond spoken word, because there's a lot of talk of voice interactivity, multimodal AI, and so on, but that's largely limited to spoken words and spoken languages. Here, their audio model has gone beyond that to detect a whole range of auditory events, ambient noises, ambient sounds, which can be interpreted by the AI in real time, which can have applications in safety, in monitoring, both in industrial settings as well as public spaces. Uh, Another very under explored area is, can you use AI for cybersecurity, where you have cybersecurity agents that can look at all the data that is coming in across your network. It could be logs, it could be incident reports, all of that stuff. Learn the kind of threats, learn the kind of network environment you have, and be able to act proactively to neutralize threats, before they manifest. And this is happening, right now. There's a startup in the stealth mode, which is actively working on this. So there's a whole world of possibilities with AI models that go beyond generative AI and large language models, which takes me to my next slide. That these Indian startups, I think, really need your support, because all this hype around DeepSeek and what China is doing and how China and US are way ahead has kind of put the spotlight on India. And the government, of course, is trying to do its bit. The India AI mission recently put out a call for proposals on Indian foundational models. There is also an effort to build a public compute capacity of GPUs. There's a tender which is, I believe, in the final stages, where they want to provide subsidized GPU compute capacity to startups and researchers. But we're not always going to ride the hype wave that is created elsewhere. I think today Indian startups have developed the confidence, the ability, and the aspiration to create technology here in India, which can potentially create a wave for the rest of the world. And so there are a couple of examples that I can give you here, where we can think of deep tech stacks all the way from silicon chips to platforms, which can be relevant both for the Indian context as well as for global markets, and which would be of interest to this audience as well, coming from the advertising space. So, for example, there is this technology called direct to mobile, or D2M, which is essentially about bringing broadcast signals to mobile phones, and without any dependency on 4G or 5G or the internet. Now, this has the potential to impact the industry in a couple of ways. One is that it makes broadcasting measurable. Being from ISA, being a stakeholder in BARC, I was part of the board as well. We know all the challenges with audience measurement in the television space. But what if you could do the same broadcasting on mobile phones and do it in a very reliable and a measurable manner? That creates a lot of value from an advertising standpoint. And today the chips for this are being made in India, and the entire tech stack is being created in India. And the same technology has an application in AI as well, where you could push out these small AI models which are optimized for mobile devices, which are small footprint, which don't need the internet, in a very secure way, using the same broadcast stack. And then you could you could push these AI models out and create an entire value chain around D2M plus AI, and that would be a very uniquely Indian use case that India gives to the world. So there is a strong school of thought that India should just be the use case capital. India should just build applications, let the big boys in the West build deep tech, foundational technologies. I think that need not necessarily be the case, and we've seen that with our space program, with ISRO, how we can build, frugal innovations. With our digital public goods like UPI and so on, we've also shown how we can build it at societal scale. So there's no reason why we should not aspire, even in the case of AI, in the context of AI, that we cannot build these foundational, technologies here in India, starting all the way from the chips, up to the platforms and the entire stack. So I think the government is, of course, trying to do its bit in pushing, this whole innovation movement. Recently, I think there was an announcement on creating a fund of 1 lakh crore rupees to boost private sector R&D. But I think the industry also needs to step up. I think industry as a community can come together, if not as individual enterprises, because these deep tech projects, be it in AI, be it in semiconductors, they entail a huge amount of risk. They entail sizable investments, and it's a long process, right? And that kind of risk tolerant investing may not be possible for an individual business, but perhaps if you come together as a community, maybe we can absorb that and do it. And I think the BARC model, though I know there are a lot of controversies around BARC and all the challenges around that BARC has had, but to me, I think the BARC model is an interesting model because you have 3 industry stakeholder bodies that have come together to do something very unique in India. Why not apply the same model to AI and deep tech research, right? Where if the different stakeholder bodies can come together and support Indian startups, I'm sure we can have many deep seek movements here. So which takes me to the next slide on what AI for India is doing. And I would like to build on this example of Dream11 that I mentioned in the previous slide on creating a gameathon where they have taken their data, made it available to various teams from different technical colleges, IITs, so that they can do innovations on that data set. And I think that's a good example of an open innovation based on a publicly accessible data set. And that kind of sets the context for what we are calling data daan. Because if you want to build AI models in India for the Indian context, it requires publicly accessible data sets. Even the Mr. Rohit from HUL also pointed out how data is so important in the whole AI adoption journey. And one of the challenges we have in India is that we don't have enough of digitally accessible, open public data sets. The India AI mission of the Ministry of IT is trying to create a data sets platform so that government bodies, public institutions can make available their data to model developers and researchers. But I don't think this will be enough just for the government to do it. I believe that there has to be a broader national movement, and the industry here and all of you who are part of the industry in India can play a very pivotal role. If you can, motivate your organizations. I know it's hard. It's not always easy to make some of these data sets available. But if you could find ways, maybe anonymized data sets which don't entail a whole lot of IP or copyright issues, if those can be made accessible to AI developers, I think it would be a huge boost to the Indian startup ecosystem. So Data Daan is an initiative that AI for India has taken up, where we've created this portal where you can go and pledge that I would like to make this data set public or accessible under certain terms or certain conditions. And those who are interested, it could be startups, researchers, labs, they could browse this portal and discover what data sets are out there that could potentially be used for AI development. And the motivation for this kind of came from a similar call that the Prime Minister made in his Mann Ki Baat sometime back on organ donation, right? And the thought was that if organs of the deceased can be donated, what about their medical records, right? So after a person has passed away, can those medical records be made available to AI developers so that we can build models for AI healthcare? So that was where this whole thought started, and that has now led to creation of this data done portal. And what we are seeing is that across different vertical domains globally, and if you look at even the current state of the most mature of AI models, they're all hitting a plateau in terms of data. So unless data is available, which is more deeper in terms of domain understanding, which reflects more richly the diversity, the context in different societies, AI will not be able to get more sophisticated. So I think data becomes so important for us, and we in India have a very unique advantage, because if you look at it, we've been the services headquarters for the whole world, right? We rode the IT wave, we rode the BPO wave, the knowledge process outsourcing wave. Now a whole bunch of global capability centers are being housed here in India. So anything around data becomes a natural strength for us, and we can potentially build data enrichment services, data annotation services, making data sets ready and usable by AI systems. So I would urge ISA as a body and all of your members to consider supporting this national movement in your own way. If you could pledge to make certain data sets public, and help the Indian startups, I think we can definitely give the Chinese and the Americans a run for their money. And which kind of takes me to my last slide, which I know there's a lot of talk of creating the AI first enterprise. I think this has followed these earlier hype cycles around creating a digital first enterprise or a mobile first enterprise. So what really is an AI first enterprise? I don't think people have figured that out yet, though I know there are all kinds of ideas like having an AI as a board member and so on. But I think maybe India has the opportunity to show the world the way on this. The Paris summit was a very, very revealing, illuminating moment for me, because it became very clear that there is a divide, a global divide. On the one hand, you have Europe, which is obsessed with concerns around AI safety, on how will you manage the risks around AI. And at the other extreme, you have the United States, which has taken a very different stance. You had the US Vice President J.D. Vance there in his speech saying that we are more focused on innovation and the opportunities around AI. And interestingly, he quoted Prime Minister Modi, because PM Modi's speech struck the right balance, where he spoke about we need to balance the opportunities of AI with the concerns, the risks, and we should not get bogged down to a point where we don't do anything. And so the world is looking to India to show the way on this. The next AI Action Summit is, I believe, going to be held in New Delhi, and clearly, both these extremes will want to look at a middle path, which perhaps India can show, and the PM speech there, I think, kind of reflected that what kind of AI would best suit India's developmental priorities. It has to be frugal, it has to be environmentally sustainable, it has to reflect our cultural nuances, our linguistic diversity, it has to preserve our local heritage, traditional knowledge systems. There's so much of traditional knowledge in India which perhaps is not even digitally available today, which will be lost in a couple of generations. Can AI capture that, preserve that for future generations? So finally, AI has to be about empowering humanity, and it is about the human insight, because that is what ultimately gives us the edge, which kind of takes me to that inflection point in 2016, when this whole current wave of AI started, right? When the AlphaGo algorithm defeated the world's top Go player, Lee Sedol, by doing a move that was never thought of. We are nowhere near that moment in a whole range of vertical domains. The human insight, the human intelligence still continues to hold an edge. And I think that kind of should give us hope that we need to look at opportunities without being too overly worried about the risks. And ultimately, the kind of AI that we need to build has to be something that sustainable, that is reliable, that is something that gives you predictable outcomes. And I think that can happen in a whole range of domains with the right kind of ecosystem if it can come together. And I think it's a great uh, opportunity, great platform that you provided, brought all these minds together. I hope ISA plays a pivotal role in this national movement in the time to come. Thanks again for this opportunity to speak to all of you.